Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another founder-led sales stories where founders who have successfully navigated their founder-led selling journey share with those who are still in the middle of it. I'm Pete Kazanji, author of Founding Sales, the Startup Sales Handbook, and your host. Today we have Evan Huck, CEO and founder of UserEvidence, makers of a customer evidence platform that helps B2B tech companies harness the voice of their happy customers to create compelling proof points at scale. Evan has successfully grown UserEvidence to $7 million in ARR with a team of 15 sales professionals, having raised $21 million from investors to build this new category in the crowded MarTech space. I'm particularly excited about today's conversation because Evan comes from the vaunted Tech Validate sales mafia. He's a sales leader by background who's now doing it as a founder, giving him a unique perspective on category creation. My biggest takeaways from our discussion were Evan's clever community thought leadership approach that generated their first big logos, his deliberate NRR curve design strategy that was critical for fundraising success, and his unconventional talent strategy of hiring ski instructors and raft guides in Jackson Hole instead of competing for experienced sales talent. We'll also dive into how UserEvidence evolved from charging whatever we think we can charge to a sophisticated multi-product platform selling six-figure deals to enterprise customers like Salesforce and Siemens. So with that, here's Evan. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another founder-led sales stories where founders who have successfully navigated their founder-led selling journey share with those who are still in the middle of it. Today we have Evan Huck, CEO and founder of UserEvidence, makers of a customer evidence platform that makes it super easy to gather compelling marketing evidence at scale. I'm pumped because Evan here is a sales leader by background, coming out of the vaunted Tech Validate sales mafia. Other members include Kelly Del Cordo, who ran large parts of Lever's sales organization, and Dheeraj Singh, current VP of sales at Canary Technologies. But this time, Evan is doing it as a founder, so he has a different view on things. The marketing technology landscape is super crowded also, so carving out attention and budget is super tough, especially with a new category of solution like UserEvidence. But Evan did it, and he's going to share with us how. So far, UserEvidence has ramped to $7 million in ARR. They now have a 15-person sales team, but it all started with Evan selling the first deal. So we're going to talk about that. So Evan, I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. I would not say we've made it. We're very much still in the middle of it as well, but done some good early motions at least.
Hey man, I think Lemkin talks about this a lot, but I think if you get like already fewer than 90% of organizations get to better than $1 million in ARR. So if you're like north of $5 million in ARR, I have to imagine that we're probably down in like the 99.9% range, or at least maybe 99.5. Who knows?
Right.
99.3. Yeah, totally. So I mean, for folks who don't know, I'm very familiar with UserEvidence because I was very familiar with Tech Validate because
Yeah.
I love the Tech Validate sales mafia, which is why I wanted to provide a little love letter there in the intro. Maybe you could kind of tell folks what the problem is that UserEvidence solves, what the organization type is, who are the like specific humans in the organization that care about it, and so on and so forth. Kind of like the parameters of the sales motion.
Yeah. So our customers are typically like B2B technology companies, really like north of like 150 employees. Anything that's like expensive, high consideration, sold in a competitive market. So a lot of like enterprise IT, security, enterprise software, anything where you need like references, case studies, analyst reports, ROI data, competitive proof to go convince a person to buy, your expensive thing versus the other six options in their space. Because if you sell something like that, inevitably you're going to get asked like, hey, can you show me someone that looks like
Does
me
this
in
work?
my industry? Like that's also seen success. And then you go scramble and try to find that. But so yeah, so those are the types of companies we work with. We sell typically to like product marketers and customer marketers in the organization, the people that are responsible for creating customer stories and customer content and proof. But then there's a bunch of consumers of the content that we create, salespeople, of course, demand gen, Marcom. But yeah, it's like our ACV is in the kind of like 30 to 80K range for like smaller companies. And then enterprise ACV can go, 100 to half a million at that very high end, if, after a successful deployment. So, and yeah, not much of a defined existing category, though customer marketing is starting to get a little bit more table stakes and defined. But yeah, in the beginning, especially, it was just, very evangelical type of sale.
Yeah. And so I would imagine it's probably different on a per segment basis, but probably the person who like has a white hot burning need for this is the customer marketer, and that persona probably only shows up when you get to a certain size of marketing organization, which is probably not a small marketing
Yeah,
organization.
generally around like 200 employees or so, you start to see like customer marketers show up. We do have like a segment of customers below that where the product marketer essentially has that customer marketing job, but it's
Of
one of,
course.
3 or 4 jobs that they have and they don't get to it often. So that can actually be a decent segment for us. Obviously, that segment just got its own inherent challenges in terms of churn and budget concerns, but can be an interesting fit for us as well. But yeah, customer marketers starting to creep down, I think, as both upsell and cross sell and net retention and lifecycle marketing becomes more important in SaaS, which is a part of customer marketing. And just there's so much noise where telling good customer stories and showing proof and evidence that your solution works is increasingly important. So we are starting to see that customer marketer get hired a little bit earlier, which is good for us.
Yeah, so but I would imagine that like really early on when you were selling those like first 25 deals or whatever it was that you had kind of mentioned were your first ones is was more focused on like the people who had the specific title, like they were supposed to be doing this as their day to day versus one slice of what it is that they were doing.
Our first customers, just because startups tend to sell to startups and those who will take a risk. I mean, I had like I should have had Figma, but it was Adobe XD back in the day, like a little clickable prototype, which is how I sold our first customers. But yeah, generally it was like smaller, Series B type companies where it was just like a VP of marketing that has to do everything, and like they didn't get to customer story creation much, and so it was that person.
Yeah, or alternative, that's a really interesting point. Like, they probably had a marketing deputy,
Mm-hmm.
but the point was is that like the field was coming to them. The salespeople were coming to them and saying like, "Yo, we need case studies. Yo, we need case studies. Yo, we need case studies." And so in that scenario, rather than it being like an orchestration platform or whatever, in order to scale like all the nooks and crannies, because a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when I was a baby PMM and PM at VMware, I actually started doing specifically like customer marketing,
Mm-hmm.
the subgenre of PMM on that. And of course, it's just like all the permutations where it's like, size of organization and like, and industry and so on and so forth. So what you want to do is like fill that out as much as possible. But when you're early on, it's like, we need non-zero. We need five,
Yeah,
right? Or
exactly.
we need 10
Like
and tomorrow and ideally like tomorrow. And so in that case, it's like for those startups, you were selling a speed story versus a completeness story for the other guys.
yeah, exactly. It's a different problem, but yeah, if you're especially if you're selling to large enterprise as a small company, you just need that initial validation period to go
Of course.
claim that you've done this with other businesses. So yeah, definitely just like a speed to creation of getting that initial evidence initially.
Yeah, which I think that ends up being kind of a theme that we hear a lot. So like, when Delve was did their founder-led sales story, and like when Warp did their founder-led sales story, like the notion of just like, founders and in this case the Series B startup, like the C-suite or the E staff kind of like too many things to do and will pay for time, like for speed and time recovery as
100%.
com as compared to like the big organizations who, and then the nice thing about the startups, of course, is that they, as you point out, like they'll take a risk, et cetera, et cetera. And then ultimately, but like they're probably churny and a pain in the ass. And like
Yeah.
once they get their 10 customer stories, they're like, thanks, that was really
Yeah, we'll see
great.
you like 3 years from now, right?
So the money's green. It kind of like, makes your NRR look stinky. But and then I think like one of the things you can do there is like if those deal cycles are fast and you can get those logos, which I think is what you kind of talked about, like the money can be green and that can be nice. And then like, who knows, maybe you can like raise funding before they actually churn.
Yeah, like the timing on the story is like there's probably so many versions of this like where we wouldn't have been able to raise subsequent rounds unless like 1 or 2 deals like that had an expansion went right. But yeah, like the net retention wasn't like great for that initial set. It was probably like 70%. But there was a couple of them, like Bill.com was one. They acquired one of our customers called Divvy. And so we went from like a 30K
Great sales org.
contract with Divvy to an 80K contract with Bill.com.
Oh,
But the rest of our customer base was
we
so
did that with
small that
Atrium.
that big 60K
That
contract
NRR was just
just
like blew
we
out.
did 115% higher retention. So like
Look at this net retention. Oh my God, they buy and they expand as long as someone else buys them.
yeah,
Um,
maybe 1 out of 30 customers, but yeah, it's So yeah, so
Hey
there's
man,
some.
that's why it's NRR and not gross retention there. Was that Sterling who bought for you guys?
No, it's the marketing department. This VP of product marketing, Pranav, who now runs his own little marketing startup. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Anyway, but I think what you're describing there is kind of like a two-stage kind of jump. And in this case, when you're one of the things Evan and I were kind of joking about this before the show is like, I'm excited to have user evidence here because it is a new category. But like, if you're thinking about doing a category creation, maybe like go slam your head against the wall instead of
don't
doing
do it.
that. Don't do it. Run away. Um, but if you're gonna do that, you gotta like get in where you fit in. And in this case, it's like, sure, we'll sell to you who has this like knowing full well that you will use us for a quarter and then never log in again and like we'll probably churn. But the good news is that in the meantime, like the revenue is the revenue is worth it, and like that's just some of the things that you have to do when you're doing a new category.
Yeah.
I love it. And so background before starting the company, I think we've had a couple of folks who are like former sales leaders on here, like Matt Pasternak from Once, who was the VP of sales at Clever, what have you. So maybe you can kind of tell folks a little bit about that here.
Yeah. So I graduated in 2010 from Stanford, and I was an econ major, which was the dumb choice. But anyway, as it sounded the most like business, so I was like, yeah, we'll do that one. Uh, yeah, at the time, like econ majors, like the path was to go to like iBanking or consulting, and so I got my suit and I went to the interview, and this woman just like grilled me on the price of like corn futures or something like that. I was like, I have no idea. She's like, what are you doing here? I was like, I don't know. And I'm like a surfer from San Diego, and I was like, this is not my thing. But at the time, like my buddies were starting to start startups. So like one of our roommates was one of the co-founders of Snapchat. One of the other guys down the hall did Robinhood. And so I was like, all right, and they were tiny at the time. I was like, that looks more fun and kind of my pace. And so I found this random company called Tech Validate, and it was the first SDR there. I didn't know anything about sales at all, but as the first SDR, especially back in 2010, it was kind of like you would benefit a lot if you had like a little bit of like systems building, like RevOps, what people would now call like RevOps skill sets. So I was started ripping, mail merges through Microsoft Entourage and Word and Excel, and like you would schedule 17 meetings from a blast to like 700, 500 people.
It was fish back then. It was like fishing with dynamite. People are like, whoa, this person merged in my first name and then maybe my company. This must clearly has been like,
Yeah.
customized specifically for me.
Yeah, so I did SDR and then eventually learned how to be an AE. We had two great co-founders of Tech Validate, especially Brad O'Neill was like one of the best salespeople and trainers and coaches. Also, we actually worked with an outside trainer from Sandler, this guy Hillman, who was really good too. So I had incredible training. So yeah, I became a seller, eventually sales manager and director of sales and account management for like a 60, 70 person org, and then went on to run enterprise sales for SurveyMonkey for a bit, and then in 2018 just became an enterprise rep and moved to Jackson Hole, and I was the top rep in the company and skied most of the day, and that was pretty fun.
I love it. Yeah, Hillman Sori and Corey Bray, of course, run Closed Loop. Corey now has a startup in the sales enablement space. I forget what it's called right now. If it's called Coach CRM, or
Coach
maybe he's
CRM,
calling it
yeah, yeah.
Closed Loop or what have you. But cool. So, like, what was the initial hypothesis behind user evidence, and like, how did you validate it?
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is, Tech Validate was kind of in a similar space. So yeah, we'd spent a long time around it, but it was also like, we felt the problem personally as salespeople. Like even at SurveyMonkey, like, our marketing team would like have these beautiful case studies from like Warby Parker and stuff like that that looked awesome, but like, yeah, you would be selling a totally different product to like a small
Napa Auto
startup, and
Parts. They're like, whatever.
that's not super relevant.
Yep.
But so like we had all these customers. There's no shortage of users and customers, but yet we only tell stories from like a small fraction of them. And so the idea was like,
Collection problem.
how do we get a more diverse representative sample? Survey is a great way and a one-to-many way to capture feedback at scale from customers. And then if we could just figure out how to transform that feedback into good-looking, designed, elegant content, and then kind of position ourselves as this third party and stamp it as credible. That was kind of the idea. And now obviously the tool set with AI has gotten a lot cooler to solve that problem. You
Yeah,
get a
no
bunch of
kidding.
fancy distribution stuff. You can like, talk to customers in a kind of synthetic way. So it's there's some more fun stuff now, but I think the core principle is, one that all salespeople would understand. It's like you're trying to go prove your thing works, like the best way to do that is just show a bunch of evidence. Like here's 18 people in your industry that used it, and here's what they did.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I wonder if there's other examples because like Tech Validate was essentially that, right? And the problem was it was super early on and like probably maybe too early because like the marketing usually like you have to have certain jobs, core jobs have to be executed on before you can kind of get to the like the third priority or fourth priority or fifth priority. And so like back when Tech Validate was operating, you probably had folks who were deploying like cloud marketing automation platform. So people were like actually getting their act together around like Marketo or ExactTarget or HubSpot or what have you, and before they could like go and pick something else up, right? And so, Tech Validate was very successful. I forget what
Yeah, it,
ARR
it's it
it went
scaled to
to.
probably 11 or 12, and it was self-funded companies, so it was a good sale.
Yeah, totally. But then I think what ended up happening was it like went in house at SurveyMonkey and kind
Yeah,
of
they
like
never they
went
never did much with
sideways.
it. Yeah, and just kind of sat
Right.
there. So
But I think that's like I think that's actually a more common pattern. Sorry, it's not like you can't necessarily run around like looking for that and being like, all right, let's like find this entrepreneurial situation where somebody like was early and then somebody was early and then they got acquired and then it kind of went sideways because
it's an
the
interesting
acquirer
idea,
didn't.
though.
Well, I think, but if people find themselves in that situation, like oftentimes things change. Kind of like Instacart works because of the iPhone, even though Webvan didn't, right? And those sort of situations. And I think that's kind of interesting here is like it's like a new category, but it's like where there had been like a pilot
Yeah,
category, like
totally. That's a
like
good way to
like
describe it.
trial balloon that happened. And like you could actually make the argument that Gong is that on top of like Exec Vision and some of the early call recording folks were like they maybe were kind of going about the use case a little bit wrong, where like Exec Vision was focused on like Exec Vision because it came out of I forget the name of the SDR consulting shop, but they like needed to like listen down across
Right. Yeah.
like all these SDRs in order to make sure that they were on message as compared to just like Gong essentially early on was just like a AE stenographer,
Right.
right? With a sales coaching narrative, so people could
Yeah.
tell themselves a story that they were going to do sales coaching, but it was a stenographer. I think that's super fascinating. So like somebody else de-risks the initial hypothesis a little bit, and then like you're able to run after it, which obviously you guys have done so far.
Yeah, and I think that was like an important de-risker. I mean, for me especially, like,
Totally.
yeah, like I didn't have a young family yet, but like taking a startup is always risky. But if you have some experience in the space, obviously that's gonna de-risk it because there's product market fit, especially in a categoryless like space. Like, ooh, that's got its own challenges too. So, yeah, picking something that we knew really well was obviously a lot less risky.
Who and so we you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but about like focusing on kind of earlier stage startups. I mean, it's not like early stage. It's like kind of just pre-growth startups, like Series B, et cetera. Um, how did you guys, how did you guys take those folks down? How did you get in contact with them? How did you close them?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we happen to know a decent amount of other founders. I mean, our very first customers were like, you know, very early stage, just like our buddies, just like tinkering on the things and like giving us quotes and stuff.
So like wildly non-ICP.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And they didn't pay us anything, obviously, but then yeah, like the
They
first,
paid you in quotes.
yeah, exactly. Um, Investor intros when we did get for our first investors, like that was helpful because they obviously had a bunch of other Series A and Series B companies. That would we didn't charge them much, it's like 5K or something, 10K, like the first couple deals. But yeah, investor network. I did do like I had some old customer contacts from my tech
Yeah, I would
network
imagine.
that I definitely pinged, and then I just did some cold outreach on LinkedIn. Pretty soon though, like even though like you and I both know I know how to build and run the whole cold outreach machine. That's my specialty. But to your point on like buying time, we actually did get an agency to just rip emails. It's called Receptive Marketing. It was great. Because even though we knew how to do it, like it wasn't our comparative advantage, and so like that generated some meetings too, just doing like email campaigns through someone else, which was helpful. But I think the most productive was probably like investors in my own LinkedIn outreach in a more targeted way.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that outbound because like this is a thing that's like super annoying about new category creation is like no one's searching for it. Like
Yeah.
I need a customer evidence
Right.
platform.
Yeah. Totally.
You have to show up and get in their grill and be like, hey, you probably have this problem. Like, am I off in left field? But here's the problem is that like MarTech is super crowded, right? Like everyone jokes about the like MarTech
Yeah,
Lumascape, but there's like
yeah.
just a bajillion
It's like
logos.
sprinkles or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so like there's that. And then also, I mean, I guess you were doing this in 2018, you said, or 2019?
2020 is when we started the company. So really, we were starting to do outreach in 2021. So it was like still kind of working, but still like not as effective as 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, so that's the thing though, right? Is it's like so you have super crowded space, right? The buyers, and so maybe in your case you were targeting, VPs of product marketing, but
Yeah.
like, and so like they're probably not getting attacked downside. They don't have any budget, like the VPs of marketing, which they might be able to like put the CMO in a headlock and get the budget out of them. So was that kind of like the crux was like targeting someone who wasn't typically targeted, like the VP of product marketing, or did you
Yeah.
guys
I
just
mean,
like
I
do
think
really good messaging, or what was
yeah,
like, how did you break through?
we sell to marketing. So, we were hitting, director level too. I think marketers get freaking hammered with MarTech
Totally,
because it's the noisiest crap. So yeah, we were not exempt from that challenge. And like,
totally.
the email campaigns yielded some meetings. It wasn't like wildfire, but like it was a good trickle enough for early, right? Because if you generate 2, 3 meetings a week, that's not bad when you don't have a whole lot of
Yeah, if it's
customers
you,
yet. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So that can kind of feed me plus my own, outbound and stuff like that through LinkedIn, which was more productive. Um, yeah, over time, like, we used to be 99% outbound, right? And over time, we had to switch that, especially as outbound got a little bit less effective, particularly email. So yeah, we've become a lot more diverse over the years and more marketing led, brand led, content led, customer led too, just building a good product
weird.
that, yeah, right. Customer evidence works. But yeah, so the early days is like, it's always a grind, but it was, a grind because outbound is all we had, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, one thing I always like to ask folks is about how they got over kind of like their fear of sales and what have you. The funny thing with you though is that that was so long ago. That was not you as a founder having to figure out how to do, founding selling. Now that being said, like you were at Tech Validate and like Brad and the other guys were
I
like
had it, yeah.
figure
So I used to pick
fig
up the phone and be like, don't pick up. I used to have like a printed out like sheet of people to call and be like, God, don't pick up, don't pick up, don't pick up. And like I feel this like knot in my gut. But yeah, no, this time around, like obviously knew what I was doing.
well, but like maybe you can kind of talk about how you kind of got over that when you were a little baby SDR, because I think that's really helpful for founders to understand. Will I ever get over this? How did you get over it?
Yeah,
Et cetera,
good
et
question.
cetera.
I think, and like obviously practice and reps, but like one of the things that develops through practice and reps is like you start to kind of decouple your individual worth, if you will, and like your person versus like your role as a salesperson. So if someone's like, screw you, like why are you calling me? And like whatever, like that's just going to like your salesperson.
That's not about
But
Evan.
there's a decent firewall between that and like your individual like role and how
Firewall.
you feel about yourself. So yeah, Hillman used to call it in Sandler is your I versus your R, like your individual and your role. But I think that was like a really important concept. Like once you start to kind of play a persona essentially, right? That you're a lot less exposed, which is really important in sales because you are going to obviously face a lot of rejection and whatever. So I think that was a really important component.
I
I
love
think
it.
also you obviously you develop confidence like as a founder. There's like just being yourself and having some product knowledge and just caring about the topic that you care about. I think is really important. One thing I did this time that was new for user evidence that we didn't have back in the Tech Validate days was like really leaned into like thought leadership, particularly in communities, right? I mean, you obviously figured this out earlier than we did, but like there's like customer marketing communities that have a Slack group. And I would just hang out there and just like answer questions that like didn't really have anything to do with user evidence. Some might be close to what we do, but like I just have a lot of experience in this space. So I just answer questions and share experiences. And that actually eventually brought in some like inbound for some like pretty impressive people that became like big logo customers. Like our first big logo customer was this guy who like pinged me on Slack. He's like, "Hey, I know you from your influence in the space," which I thought was kind of funny. I was like, "All right, cool."
Me?
But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was like I think that formula obviously, and now it's been blown out a little bit more. This kind of like founder led brand, but I think that was like a really good little wedge there for a second and or interesting complement to the outbound for sure. And it just helps you like kind of frame your perspective and develop your own voice, and then it becomes a little bit like less selling and more consultative and you're kind of giving advice, and that's a better place to sell from.
Yeah, totally. Because like people show up when they have a problem in that scenario. Like, I don't know. I'm pretty vocal about this on LinkedIn about like the stupidity and the selfie videos and what have you. And like that's very different. It's kind of like the personalized email that is not relevant.
Hmm.
Hey, Ev, how's it going? Did you go to the treehouse much when you were at Stanford House Palm Drive? And you're just like, get the fuck out of here, man. Like, this has nothing to do with anything that I have a business pain
If someone did
about right
something to
now.
me about the treehouse, I would absolutely. I've never gotten that. That would be epic. I would answer
You're
immediately.
ruining my point. But the point is that like versus I have a problem right now. My CRO is up my ass about uh, stories, customer stories, and specifically around like in these ways, can you help me? And then of course, like they have need in some sort of capacity. And I think that one, I'm reminded of I think it's a Zig Ziglar quote around like you'll get everything you want as long as you help everybody else get everything that they want.
Hmm.
So like start by answering questions. Q&A is a great example of this. Like I'm wearing a Modern Sales Pros shirt right now. At this point, like most categories like probably have a community where people hang out. And so instead of you being able to own the community, which is something that frequently marketers will do, is they'll be like, I want to create a community. I'm going to buy some software and then it's going to be empty. You can like go. So Dan Schmela, who was an early operator at Modern Sales Pros, and then he went on to lead community at Chili Piper, and then Apollo as well. He did this really clever thing at Chili Piper when the founder of Chili Pepper is like, "Hey, make me an MSP." And Dan was like, "I'm sorry, I can't. Like, there's network effects. Like, you're not going to be
Right.
able to break in to like MS. Like, this is hard. But we can distribute and we can have voice in all the different places, and we can. But importantly, we can be like helpful and thoughtful in those various places. And then it's funny. It's like I think you talk about the long game as part of your message. In this case, it's the long game as like a founder brand, which then metamorphoses into the company brand. But like it's essentially expertise. Like I'm obviously a pretty good example of that as relates to Atrium and what have you. And then ideally you're able to capitalize on it when it comes to product. But at least you can kind of like it's almost like fake it till you make it. Like yes, we are highly reputable because of all of my expertise. You should give our product a try. And they're like, I will give your product a try for one annual contract, and then you better deliver on it. Maybe you can talk with folks about how pricing worked, like how it started out,
Yeah.
paid with quotes from your homies, and evidence there, and then like how it kind of changed over time.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, at first we were just like, we needed logos. Like we weren't, whatever tiny revenue was not going to move the needle anyway. So just whatever it took. There is a difference though. Like for an enterprisey thing, there's a little bit of value signaling. Like we tried a few free trials and that just like tried a decent amount of them, 6 to 10. They never worked. Like you have to have some skin, but even like $1,000 pilot, like that would work. They like you got
Yeah,
the
it's just enough to DQ
infrastructure
them.
open. Yeah, exactly. So it's like a little bit of friction is good, I think, just to really like
It's
hone in on
real.
product market fit. Like I think and granted, I'm not like a PLG self-serve thing, but I do think that was important. Like really early, we were asking for money with real prospects. Would you pay for this and do it? So I think
But I
that was
think,
a good signal, other than just people being like, "Hey, I love your product and I'll give it a try." Sure, which
yeah,
wasn't
I
the
mean, I
case.
think that's, yeah, totally. And I think that that's, so first of all, so selling to your friends if they don't have need is stupid because you're going to, this is like the joke I talk about like, people doing revenue trades inside their accelerator or what have you, because then it just like, it all shows up in churn. But then importantly, you're like losing the market signal, right? Like the Hayekian like price signal as to whether or not like someone gives a shit about this in a real way that like they'll throw down. And so that it can be a friend. So it's like, hey, I have a friend who is a VP of marketing. They do have this problem because they have 20 sellers. I'm able to get access to them because we are friendly
Yeah,
or they're in a network. However, I know that they're title qualified and org qualified, and actually like I will give them the friend price, but it will not be the zero price
yeah,
because in that case they will not have skin in the game, and I will
they
I
want
will
to do it
break
anyway.
the market signal, which of course is like really bad.
Yeah, totally, exactly. So yeah, the first iterations, like when we started getting some real customers, 5, 10K. And then our first pricing model is basically like, once we got some decent comfort that we can deliver some value, is basically like, just charge whatever we think we can charge. Like there was no differentiation in terms of
Say
feature
more
functionality.
about that. I love it.
We call it, and I took econ again, don't recommend it, but if it did, perfect discrimination is what we call that.
It's so great.
Which works.
You're a car salesman. Someone walked in and they were like rocking a Rolex or whatever. You're like 90K.
You're kind of big, 45K. You're 10K. So yeah,
It's
so that
so
was
good, man.
V1 because we didn't have like a whole lot of features and functionality to do plan our addition based pricing. So it's just like, here it is, charge you whatever we think we can charge you.
I love
V2,
it.
when we started to get enough like features and additions, yeah, the classic kind of like good, better, best additions based thing, and that made a huge difference. Like, it's so crazy how like strong that human concept is to want to like find the good deal and choose the middle package.
Yeah,
It
totally.
was awkward when people like a couple times people chose the upper package, and we intentionally threw shit in there that like wasn't even a feature. And just like it sounded so dumb and unnecessary. They're like, "Yeah, I want that." Like, oh,
Jetpacks. Jetpacks.
we don't have that one. Crap. But it did its job mostly of getting people to choose the middle one, and that brought up ACV quite a bit, especially as we were starting to like target our ICP towards a little bit more mid market at that point. And then, we've thought about a little bit of like usage based pricing. It doesn't like number of sales people consuming the content. We never really had the setup to do that yet. What does work at a bigger company like a Salesforce or Cisco or something like that, it's like licensing on like a per product family basis. So like at Salesforce,
Sure.
for instance, like our
Per
first instance
PMM.
is like Sales Cloud, next one
Yep.
Service Cloud,
Service
Directory,
Cloud.
Commerce Cloud.
Marketing Cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So that works to get to like pretty big ACV over time, and also helps with your net retention is like landing these small proof of concepts with these bigger enterprises and then just landing and expanding. But I don't know. I've thought about usage based pricing. I know the new one's even trendier. Like you could have consumption based pricing on how many assets people are using, but I don't know. It's like whatever. The next iteration for us, the final iteration where we're at now is like a combination of additions based pricing with that, scaling by product unit. And now we have multiple offerings because we just acquired a company called Zealot that has functionality and advocate engagement and customer references. And then we have one more offering, which is like these longer format research reports, analogous to like a Forrester total economic impact report. So we had a customer yesterday that's like, I want UE Core Pro plus Zealot advocacy silver plus Zealot references plus an RO
The truck.
plus an ROI study. I was like, sweet. And like that was like 100K.
Problem, boss. I'm right on it. Yeah, let me draw that right up. Let me draw that proposal up for you.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I'm not too concerned around the usage based stuff just because we have so many different routes right now for cross sell and expansion once we land that works.
Yeah, but I think the other thing here too is that it's important to like price how people are like used to buying in this case. And so I would imagine that most of the organizations that are buying you guys are probably like indexing off of like a Marketo, like a marketing automation platform or what have you. And so in those sort of situations, like obviously it's going to be like platform, like like size of platform, size of database, which probably was one of the reasons why people were like more comfortable when you were like, "You're giant, you're gonna pay this." They're like, they probably had a huge database and they were probably paying Marketo like an ungodly amount of money, and they were like, "Okay, cool. Like this is a totally reasonable fraction of my marketing automation platform spend." But I think a great thing that you observe is how to naturally add more. So you don't like you want to make it easy to get in, not like hey free trial, but like easy to get in some sort of capacity, especially in the enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
right? Get in at a 25K or 50K where they're like, yeah, this is real. This is a VP can say yes, right? Versus it like going up above that. But then you don't limit your upside. So you can then go, and I think you guys did a really good job of
I
chunking
think
that on a product basis.
it's also really important, like, thinking about the founders that we're talking to, like, that are trying to raise, an A or something like that. I think a lot about curve design in the early
Yeah,
stages, which means like
NRR.
NRR curve design. So like 2 year deals with a step up were a great little tool. All right, 10K year one, 20K year two. Guess what? You just built in 200% net
NRR.
retention, right? So like that, tricks like that, the land and expand with a small contract, because like you can't go raise if you have 80% net NRR. So it's just a binary. You just can't do it. So like, you're sequencing your priorities. Like first is like curve design to get to 115 to 125% net retention. Then you worry about, optimizing for overall revenue. And so, yeah, I think like that was an important realization pretty early where it's like, all right, we need to also just to be really thinking about our NRR curve design.
That's so funny. I really appreciate you commenting on that, Evan, because just for everyone's, I've known Evan for about a decade now because I forget exactly how it was. And when I was doing early research with Atrium, and 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 like I was able to do this interview with this guy who was like leading sales at Tech Validate at the time. I forget how I got referred into you, but like essentially all the roads pointed back to Tech Validate the same way that like many roads point towards like MuleSoft or whatever. Essentially that, like or Fisher Investments.
Yeah.
Essentially like I ended up finding all the like the
It was
river the
Deerage. Deerage was an MSP, and that's why.
yeah, it was like essentially I was found my way to like the data-driven sales organizations, and then I was able to meet Evan, and then of course I went back down again to all the like children of Tech Validate to find all the other data-driven salespeople who who obviously were very data-driven, very thoughtful because they had a sales leader who was like wicked smart and also very very data-driven as a result of that. But also this is data-driven in a different way, which is hey man, like you don't screw yourself because if you can, like maybe if you hang a big transaction on an organization and they don't realize value, and you're like, wow, man, that $100,000 is so great.
Freaking
Let's
dangerous.
we're going to Vegas. Let's go, right? And then like lo and behold, they churn notify like month 6. You're
you're
like, oh
screwed. Yeah, like
my god.
yeah, I get like we double click hard on like the bigger deals now, and I think a lot about like, all right, are we dang confident that we're gonna like deliver value? Obviously, multi years and stuff like that can help, but like, yeah, we just don't bite off more than you can chew, because like, yeah, the 100K
It'll
might
get
help in
you.
the next 6 months, but that could be disaster in 12
Yeah,
months, right?
it's the founder-led sales marshmallow test, right? Like you can eat your marshmallow now and like and forego the 5 marshmallows later from the Series A when you're like, and we are like toxic waste, like we can't raise any money. I mean, I think like this is why land and expand is very helpful in the enterprise for a variety of reasons. One, it's going to raise your win rates. It's going to compress your deal cycles. It's also going to make it such that like it's easier to go up like not only easier to go up, but also probably easier to renew too.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jason Lumpkin talks about this quite a bit about how like oftentimes in the enterprise, your first year renewal is often like kind of like we only just got implemented 6 months ago. Like what's going on,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And so if that transaction is 25K or 30K, and like the total value, like the total size of prize in the organization is potentially 200K or like 300K or what have you. Well, then this little like 25K or 30K business unit transaction is being looked at in the like okay cool like we'll do our second year pilot to see if we can go all
Yeah,
the way in and like deploy to what would be 200K or 300K versus if you throw down with that 100K initially, folks are going to have like they're really going to have yeah they're going to have their eyes on that and they're going to make a decision within whereas, with a 50K transaction, they might have given you another year to figure things out. They're going to make a judgment at like month 6 as to whether or not they're going to renew or not.
yeah,
And that
totally.
can be really problematic with an early like, light product market fit,
Right.
like
Yeah.
feature poor product. That I think that's, all of that is really really good. One thing that I think is ends up being really tough, and I remember having this conversation with both you and Dheeraj. I remember talking about deal cycles and win rates at Tech Validate. And if I recall correctly, the win rate was like it was like under 10%. Um, it
Yeah,
was
the way
it
we
was
measured it, I realized is different than people talk about it. I mean, it was win rate from like very first intro call off a cold email or a cold call to close,
that's still fine.
which yeah, most people are probably doing now, like sales qualified to close. So
I don't do that. Like I want to be negative, right? Like I want to see how many of your deals are you winning from first meeting.
yeah,
And so but like by the way, we had this with Atrium. Like new category stuff, you're always gonna have a really low win rate, and you're gonna have a really low win rate, and you're gonna have like egregiously long deal cycles. And so this is why it can oftentimes be really powerful. So one, when you find a true believer, it has to be like economically viable. So ideally like the ASP can be higher. And then two, you have to like if you can find a compelling event so that you can hitch onto that, or is you find a way of like hanging out around the hoop forever, like just like nurturing like really, really,
Yeah,
really well. And so I'm kind of curious about how you guys kind of contend with that. It's not obvious to me what
it's a great
compelling
question.
event there would be for someone to be like, I
Yeah.
really need some user evidence right now.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can like, there's like weak ones, like we have an event, we need something for SKO, but like usually, yeah, it's not like great. Um, the the win rate thing was an interesting one, especially when you combine it with the nurturing. Like the way I look at it, especially in a non-category, in a category, it's like, yeah, you either win or you lose, right? And that's kind of it. Like these ones, because it's a lot more evangelical, they don't have a budget for it, they don't have a
No decision.
concept for it. It's like it takes 3 or 4 whacks at them usually, where it's like it'll look like in HubSpot, yeah, there's 3 or 4 opportunities, but realistically, it's like over an 18-month period, it's kind of the
Yep.
same opportunity in a way. So like, yeah, that
Yep.
initial close rate might be sub 10%, but after 3 or 4 opportunities, if you add that up, then you're kind of getting to that like 20-25% mixed. Then you're good. So yeah, I heard that was a big thing even for us. Like when we set out our annual plan this year was like we need a model. Our marketing and sales model should consider that like we're not going to win the deal on the first try every time. So given that, how does that change our thinking? And I think that led to some like really good
This is,
ideas and
yeah,
rethinking.
I think there are, so for folks who are, dealing with new categories who are listening to this after the fact, there's a bunch of ramifications that come from that. One is like Ev is saying, multiple passes over the target. We call that deal source resurrection,
Mm-hmm.
just to be creepy about it.
Yeah.
Um, and so we would systematize that heavily in our sales organization, right? It was like we wanted to make sure that people, SDRs, we had like a whole system to it where there was like a Salesforce report where if the close date, the close loss date was greater than 90 days, it would like pop up on the report. Sorry, like close date greater than 90 days, no open opportunity right now, pops up in the Salesforce report. The SDRs are in there and they're like, all right, like, because like they're like wonderful
Yeah, they're
source
specialty
of
too, for
lead.
sure.
Yeah, they're wonderful source of leads usually. And I think you have to be thoughtful as like a founder seller, and of course then when you're managing AEs, not to blow up the deal like, all right, you have to buy, or like, like you're dead to me, right? Like because it's definitely like a sushi boat sort of situation, like it's going to come back around again.
Coming up.
um yeah, and you don't want to, like, it's going to come back around again, it's going to come back around again in 90 days. It's almost like an account management behavior
Mm-hmm.
until they buy. Like you're going to buy, it's just a question of when, right? Once we get the priorities straight. And then the second thing, so like doing that and systematizing that. And then the second thing is really just like following your champs. Like we were big fans of using user gems for that at Atrium. And because like once you find a true believer, you just gotta like follow them, right? And then not just like the true believer, but then also like users to the extent that you can.
Yeah,
That
totally.
can be a very powerful thing. And so like, what ends up happening is like the compelling event actually is like their job change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but unfortunately that's not the same kind of like volume as like SKO is happening
Yeah,
or
I
what have
mean,
you.
but we like so there's two things in there. Like one, I think part of the reason beyond just struggling to generate enough pipeline through straight cold outbound that we want heavy like we've made some big bets on like brand content really before they yielded. It took like 8 quarters for them to actually even do anything. But like that was part of it. It's like, all right, if we're gonna have 3 or 4 opportunities, like we need different touch points, right? We can't just like continue to email them, right? So it's like getting an
How about a
event.
demo? How about now?
Yeah,
What about
totally.
now?
Having a big content report to send them, or inviting them to Jack's Knoll for Highline or something like that. Like you have a much more diverse portfolio of ways to nurture and engage, which matters in a multi-period game where you're gonna have to do this over 3 or 4 or 5 opportunities. But yeah, so I think that's important. And the other one on the kind of like signal-based thing that you're getting to, that's actually been a really big lift for us this year too. Is like this kind of concept of like signal-based selling, which could be job changes, it could be they're new in a role even within their current company, they got like a promotion or something like that, where it's like these moments in their career where they're like, all right, they have a little bit of leash to do something or they want to make a big impact, right? And finding people at those moments, I think, has been definitely helpful for pipeline generation as signals for our sales team.
Yeah, like the T in Bant timeline historically has been harder to detect, but if you can find it, not always, but if you can, it can be great, right? And so a job change is a good example of that. And somebody like as an example, someone titled customer marketing or like director of customer marketing manager, or whatever. Like as soon as they show up in an organization, I wonder why they were hired. Right? Yeah, exactly. Like especially if they're the first one. It's
Right.
just like, hey, I wondered I wonder what pain point they're hiring was. And I guess in this case, it would not just be like them landing in the job, but maybe even like the job rec lighting up on the
Yeah,
applicant
totally.
tracking
100%.
system, right? Okay, so kind of doing some more thinking there around kind of compelling events and like triggers and what have you. What worked really well from a pipe gen standpoint? Like what worked really well for like pipe gen and like founder led during your founder led sales motion?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the investor network was good. Definitely my own LinkedIn outbound was huge. That outsourced email campaign was great initially. We eventually hired two SDRs. I mean, we knew how to train SDRs really well. So they started doing calls and emails and started generating some ops. Yeah, eventually emails like got a little bit less effective. And we did buy Nooks. Nooks has been great. I'm so shocked at how many people answer their damn phones. Like I never answer the phone on no numbers, but luckily some marketers do, which is great. So yeah, I think we've generated a lot of pipe from cold calls, which is cool. They've also gotten just like so good at it. Like they get so many more reps when you're like using an auto dialer like
Oh,
that.
the SDRs, yeah,
Just the
oh
coaching and
yeah,
stuff like that. It's like they're so much better than I was. I would get like one connect every once in a while and was terrible at it. But yeah, they're really good now. It's crazy. So yeah, so that's been good. Content been a big channel, right? So like our one of our highest performing assets last year was like this evidence gap report where we surveyed 200 sellers, 200 marketers, and 200 buyers, and asked them basically the same questions to kind of expose, what kind of evidence buyers aren't getting and what sales is using and the differences and all that. Anyway, that got like 1,600 downloads, which is we're not, again, keep in mind we're not in a category, we're not a well-known company. Like that's a lot for us, and that generated some serious pipeline. So I think in today's like AI age, like one thing we did is like we used to like do blog posts like every week, and we're just like, all right, screw that. Like, let's just
yeah.
focus on like big
You need
raft
like
content.
10 pole. Yeah, I call it like in the founder-led sales forum, I call it like 10 pole content,
Yeah.
right? Like a book
Mhm.
or like surveys are great.
Yeah.
Um, Ideally, it should be aligned to the problem that you're solving. People love to do salary surveys because they're really like, high FOMO. Like, yeah, I would love to see the salary survey for a product marketer or whatever. And it's just
Hmm.
like, okay, like cool. You got a form fill from some PMM,
Right.
like who has like no
Yeah.
intent as related to like customer evidence or what have you. But so if you can figure something out that can be like really tentpole that is aligned with like the problem that you solve, and especially even a new category, because like the thing is being done in some sort of capacity. It's probably being done with like Google Sheets
Right. Yeah.
or
Totally.
what have you. So like if you can do a survey or you can do content around that, that can be good. Okay, so that's something that like worked really well. What didn't work well at all?
Let's see. I mean, if you're in a non-category, there's no such thing as any sort of like search marketing. I mean, you can do branded search and competitive search and stuff like that. Like that works, but like we tried to. I knew this wasn't going to work, but we just tried it just to check the box. Like some non-branded search around like B2B case studies software. Like how to. There's just like what do you look? No one's looking for that stuff in a coherent way such that you can capture demand. So that was in a non-category there's just no sense in spending time there. So
Yeah,
that's one thing that definitely didn't work.
that didn't work.
I mean, email, just straight email campaigns are just like becoming just less and less effective. So it's just you have to have it, either they have to be relevant or timeline or life cycle oriented, but just like the raw email blasts just get less and less, even if it's
Take a
like
demo.
warm.
Take a demo, please. I'll
And
send you AirPods.
deliverability and all that shit's just a pain in the ass too. It's just like I hate email. So yeah, so those are my two examples of stuff that didn't work.
Nice. I think one of the things that we talked about was tying to a compelling event or what have you. How did you remove like what were things that you figured out for removing friction over time in your deal motion?
I mean, one thing that we've always done, just again, me being now a that retention focused person, is that like we do deploy every agreement that we have with a 45-day out for convenience. And so that like if that person's going to cancel, I'd rather have them cancel 30 days in than cancel 330 days in.
Like you'd rather know and not actually book the revenue.
I'd rather not have the revenue because then I'd, like versus like have to chase down a hard renewal. Like I'd rather just get it out of the door quickly. So yeah, and it's also the thing. It's good for the customer, right? They don't want something that's not going to work, and so it's just and it de-risks it, right? So it's a little bit easier. So yeah, that 45-day out for convenience. I believe in that. Works well for our style of product where you can get in there pretty quickly, run a survey, create a bunch of content within 30 days. So yeah,
They're like, here it is. Do you want to do more of these? Like, did that scratch the itch that you were here? Yeah, it did. Okay, great. We're on our way.
right,
Right.
exactly. So that's good. I mean, customer evidence of our own. Like we have such good content now. That's like, hey, here's why product marketers who switched from spreadsheets, you know, chose user evidence, and here's the results that they get. So like, it's funny because we have such good content and like our deal sizes aren't huge. Like I rarely get asked for like references anymore. Like if we've done like we do like 2 or 3 a year maybe.
Because you did the references is the top of the funnel.
Yeah, we already have such good customer proof where it's like, all right, we get it. Like that checks the box. So that's been kind of interesting, and I think obviously helps reduce the friction. But yeah, I don't know if I found anything like silver bullet on compelling events or we've experienced like even free pilots and trials. I've been mixed. Definitely not trials. Pilots are much better, but yeah.
But I think what I'm hearing here is like the way of removing the friction was like to pull the customer references forward by almost making them the story, which is kind of funny because buddy of mine, Rob Snyder, is writing this book called I think it's called Pull, or I don't know if that ended up being the eventual name, but he talks a lot about this notion of like repeatable case studies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where like essentially your organization is a repeatable success story delivery machine,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then you obviously want to get one of those or like multiple of those. And what that means is not the documentation of the success story. It's like this is the success in the world has been delivered, and then we document that, and then we get it out there as much as possible. And then people are like, "Hey, that's me."
Mm-hmm.
With a different name, right? And
Exactly.
so in your and then so if you start out with that, and an organization that actually was extraordinarily good about this was Salesforce
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. I don't know if folks have read Behind the Cloud. They talk about this quite a bit about how Mark Benioff was always focused on. I think it was less about proof and it was more about like vanity,
Mm-hmm.
and like, but they would. You see this even now with Dreamforce. You'll see people most of the marketing. There's always a human. There's always a human. There's a quote. There's a logo,
Yeah.
right? It's a very identifiable logo, usually. And so people are like, yeah, okay. They show up and they trust because there's like a human there. And I think what I'm hearing here is like, obviously part of this is like drinking your own champagne,
Sure. Yeah.
but in a situation where it's hard to like remove friction because it's a new category, what you can just do is like mind virus or incept the entire like market into the fact that they ought to be doing this because these humans are doing it.
Yeah, I think like today, especially, there's so many dang choices when it comes to vendors. Like, it's not necessarily like who's the best vendor; it's who's the best vendor for me. And people expect like think about the difference in how we search. Like we used to search best CRMs. Now it's like, all right, AI, you already know everything about me, so what's right for me? And so like getting towards a more personalized, relevant, specific delivery of stories and proof or evidence or whatever you want to call it. I do obviously that's what we sell, of course, but like I do think it matters, especially in a non-category where they're like, all right, what the heck is this thing? And like, is it going to work and deliver ROI for me? You need to see some proof before you make that leap. And it's got to be like ample and obvious, or else you're not going to go to your boss and be like, here's a $45,000 survey tool thing. Like, let's rip it. Versus like here's CRM or marketing automation, which we know we need to have, is like a lot easier conversation to have, right?
Yeah. So, in terms of getting people successful, that must have been very important. What was particularly important when it came to kind of customer success early on with you guys?
I mean, we weren't great at it. I mean, the cool part is that, obviously you get to like be supported by the founders, which is fun. So like, we are obviously sharp and like we listen and like we can build stuff, but like we weren't checking in as often as we needed. And so like definitely like the frequency of like customer success motion was not as great. And that like our retention rate beyond just ICP focused product, maturity, our customer success motion after we hired our first like VP of customer success, this guy Miles, who was an early outreach CSM and ran CS for Postal. like got a lot better. That made a big difference, like having a like stronger touch points, more repeatable motion. So I don't think we like it was fun to work with the founders, and I think that's one of our, even at 150 enterprise customers, like Ray and I, my founder, are still in every Slack group. So like we get to see what's going on, the questions people are asking, the bugs they're encountering. And so it's really good, like pattern recognition across that. And like I get to jump in and like do the same thing I did when I was talking about community thought leadership, just like not only just answer questions like here's how to do this, but like give more framework and guidance on like, all right, given what I'm hearing you saying, like here's a different way to think about it. And I think that's a really cool like touch for customers that they appreciate.
Yeah, and they like that too. I mean, I think even once because you're at the point where you guys have six AEs, six SDRs, you probably have like 3 to 5 CSMs at
Yeah.
this point, or
Yeah.
or what have you. Yeah, so like at that point, the founder's like out of it, but they can still kind of like run around sprinkling fairy dust
Mm-hmm.
on things, and so someone's like, "Whoa, Evan answered my question about." Appropriate collection strategy or this annoying case over here or whatever, yay, warm fuzzies, right? And they really appreciate that. How many customers did you end up closing before your first sales hire
Probably like 20 to 25, maybe 30 at the high end. And we
at
hired
that
sales.
ASP, at that 50K ASP?
No, it wasn't. The ASP wasn't nearly that. Yeah, that initial 30 customers, the
10
ASP
to
was
10 to
probably like
20.
10 to 12, yeah, to 15
Okay.
at the most. So it was like it was early. I mean, given that, especially with the Tech Validate experience, knew the product market fit was there and it would get better once we built out more stuff. We also really knew how to train SDRs. So I think that was like, it's not like we're going to go hire a salesperson and see how it goes. It's like, no, we know exactly like who to look for,
we're
what
gonna
to
we're gonna
do.
get him, make
And
him a machine.
yeah, exactly. So it was like relatively low risk in that respect. And eventually I was like, I believe pretty strongly, like I've never successfully hired an AE from the outside, to be honest. Not that I tried a little bit, but it just never works. But so I love just like, obviously
Growing them.
developing SDRs. So in order to get AEs, I knew I had to spend, find some SDRs and give them a year at SDR to get them to AE. So I had to start the clock sooner or later, right?
Yeah, yes, that's all. So where'd you go shopping for that? You're in Jackson Hole, just
Yeah,
went
Jackson
shopping for
Hole. I mean,
ski bums?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly. Like there's kids that like want to good schools and like hardworking. Like if you can plan a backcountry tour for like a high end client or something like that, like, you're pretty just cool and interesting. And like, you could obviously talk to people, but you're organized. If you're a professional athlete, you're probably like, if you're a pro skier, you're probably, know how to work hard and take risks and stuff. Yeah, there's some really cool people, like very diverse backgrounds. One guy was a sushi chef, one guy was, pro skier, a lot of like raft guides, fly fishing guides. And there's a subset of them that, again, like went to good schools and like wanted to get back into like career oriented things and traditionally would have went, home to the East Coast, wherever they're from. But this gave them an option to actually like stay in Jackson, but have like a more like velocitous career while still doing all the cool outdoor stuff they love. So yeah, the people we have here are pretty sweet.
Got it. So that was kind of like the profile. Is the sales org all still in Jackson?
We have 6 here in Jackson with me, and then we have 10 in Denver because we had some people move from Jackson to Denver, and then we just kind of started building around them. But Jackson's not big enough. Like we'd look for a person here 3 or 4 months ago, I didn't find anybody. So sometimes you find them, sometimes you don't. But it's a small town, like 10,000 people. Yeah, the rate we're scaling, like we have to be able to hire outside too. But I do think like, especially for SDRs with our model of growing internally, having an in-person component is huge for speed and coaching and development and just like fun. Like doing cold calls in your bedroom is like freaking depressing, right? So just having a social component, I think is, I mean, you remember like in San Francisco, that shit was super fun, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the buddy of mine, Martin Roth, who was the CRO
Yeah.
at Level Set. Yeah, so Martin was, he was CRO at what was originally Z-Lean and rebranded to, thankfully, to Level Set. It was in New Orleans. Great place. They kind of had like the run of the talent
Yeah.
there. Like they were the cool kids in New Orleans, and then they kind of ran out of humans, and so then they stood up a location in Austin, and it worked really well for them. But they didn't have like, hey, let's just like hire people all over the place. It was like, no, 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 NOLA, Austin when we've got like both of our sales floors there. And like we're going to take people from here and we're going to drop them into Austin and we're going to stand up the office there. And then like we're going to have like, people who are hanging out there
It is
to
nice,
kind of
like
infuse it.
relative to like San Francisco and New York. Like I remember like even at Tech Valley, it's like we were in Berkeley, like we didn't pay as much as like, the tier one startups. So like you were always just worried, oh, Gong just offered me $175,000. Like, oh well shit, I can't compete with that. So like goodbye.
Yeah, bye.
But like the nice part about like not a whole lot of competition and like and certainly in Jackson, but like even like the slightly less traveled ones in Denver and whatnot. Like so like we have obviously like I think a great company and great culture, which is the most important thing for retention. But like not having to compete with freaking Notion or Anthropic throwing $300,000 or something is like kind of nice.
Yeah, totally. What so you were talking about like we know how to grow SDRs, we know how to like, advance them into AEs. What did you do well in hiring and onboarding and kind of managing those folks? What's the secret there?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, the raw ingredients is the most important thing. So in interviewing, it's like you're really looking for creativity and humbleness and curiosity, so which is all about the your ability to learn quickly and just raw intelligence, of course, but also just like your drive and hustle and like ability to like work through what's a pretty challenging role, SDR. So yeah, hiring I think was like obviously where it all starts. And the first couple of reps, obviously had very frequent direct access to me and Ray, who were both ex SDRs, ex sales leaders, so that worked. The middle ones probably had a little bit of challenge where they got like a little bit less
Yeah.
time with us, but we also didn't have much process. And so they just learned from
Ooh.
like our first SDRs. And then
Yeah.
we started to like, when we got like our first SDR manager, who was an SDR, of course, to start, and then a teacher by background,
There
that's
you
when
go.
she started to like, put in curriculum as teachers do, uh, which definitely made a big difference. And like, yeah, now the onboarding and training machine is pretty dialed, even though they don't get as much interaction with me, but like, there's a bunch of really good curriculum because someone created it. But yeah, so the first one was just really exposure, and then there was a gap in the middle, and then eventually curriculum.
So aside from that gap, what were the other kind of mistakes you made in like hiring and onboarding?
Um, let's see. Uh, I don't know. I had the benefit of like
I never
dealing with
make
like
mistakes.
I know 100 people, where it's like I've made a lot of the mistakes in the past. I've definitely made some mistakes on like hiring here and there, just the over, but like I don't know, like especially with SDR, it's like you're gonna have some misses. It's okay. It's a super measurable role, so it's not like an expensive miss when it happens, um, versus like leadership, which is different. But so yeah, I think it's like I actually like taking a little bit of risk on SDRs and like
Sushi,
yeah,
sushi chefs.
yeah, it's like all right, this one's high beta, it might not work, but it could be really great, and some of them do, some of them don't. But so yeah, I think of it kind of as like a portfolio again, especially for us, where it's like we need these SDRs to eventually become AEs and directors of sales and stuff like that. Like looking for that upside is definitely like a focus in addition to just being able to do the role.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, this is super awesome. And if you were to kind of like give the parting shot to someone who's in your shoes, but maybe like 18 to 36 months behind you, selling a MarTech, maybe has a new category of software that they're trying to take to market and popularize, what would kind of be your takeaway and your advice for them?
Yeah, I think just take it kind of like 1 week at a time, right? Like I never
Mhm.
decided to start a company. We just started doing stuff and eventually got enough good feedback where we just kept doing more stuff and then building some stuff and then charging some money for some stuff. And eventually we're like, oh, wait, there's a company here. But it wasn't like a moment where we're like, all right, we're officially doing this thing. It's just, we just took some steps. So I think like taking some steps, just making incremental progress. I think a lot of company building is just doing a lot of incremental progress, which seems boring and non-sexy. And when you're in it, is frustrating and messy. And then you look back and you're like, all right, cool. Like we've actually gone somewhere. And it still seems like that. Like even my own advice, I don't take where it's like in a given week, I'll be like way up and way down. Like this thing's gonna freaking fail. And then 2 days later, is the biggest company ever. And so just staying like even keel. Like definitely have moments where you're revisiting and like taking an honest look. I think one of the toughest things is like for a lot of my friends' companies that just like they spent 3 or 4 years on it and then they doesn't go anywhere and they have to shut down. Like, not to say those aren't good experiences because you learn a lot of stuff, but like, so you do have to take honest looks at your company, but at the same time, like, don't look too often and like have long periods of just execution where you're just doing stuff and just if you do enough
Yeah,
stuff
and also like look at the leading indicators, right? Like are we like are just like sales management, right? Like are we getting first meetings? Because if we're not getting first meetings, that means no one gives a shit,
yeah
right? Are we getting second meetings? Because if we're not getting second meetings, it seems that they don't believe us,
mm-hmm.
or they don't think that they have the problem, or like our demo is like not compelling, right? And I think that those like the leading indicators, there are other kind of like leading indicators as well as relates to just company company building as well. And one of my favorite business books is The Score Takes Care of Itself. Bill Walsh, Stanford Football, yay. And I think that like to the extent that you can measure those things, you can manage them, and that applies to company building the same way it does like if you're doing founder-led sales, or if you're onboarding reps and managing those folks as well, right? Because if you're just looking at your ARR counts or like your NRR counts or whatever, like that's not going to fluctuate very much. And then moreover, like it's very difficult for you to you know
impact pay
directly impact it versus saying like, oh, we have NRR problems. What is the NRR problem?
yeah
Let's create some hypotheses around that. Okay, cool. Like look at utilization, or let's look at like
yeah
do we have
to,
different
to the point
cohorts or
you put out, it's
customers?
like that is a good advice that I just give to people on the way in. It's like even in sales, like break down whatever your goal is into like the smallest components you possibly can. Then you'll get things you can actually like do something about.
Do yeah.
So yeah, like the more you understand your equation for how the business works, and the smaller you can make that equation into smaller and smaller variables, then the blueprint for action becomes a lot more apparent. Once you look at it in that light.
Yeah, you can do things, and then you can measure the doing things of that, and like measure whether or not like, and then kind of form experiments and hypotheses around that in order to do that, versus just like a big ball of lots of variables and vibes that just like gives you existential dread. Um, Wonderful. Well, Ev, this is super fantastic. Appreciate you taking the time, and we'll see you around. Okay.
That should be the title of your next book, just a big ball of vibes that gives you existential dread. How to Build a Startup by Pete Kazanji.
A big ball of vibes that gives you existential dread, how to be a non-data driven CRO, right?
Yes.
Awesome, Ed. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Good to hang out, Pete.